minutes. There are only three of you now who have joined, so we'll be waiting for a few minutes. Maybe some other students will join us in a minute. So in a few minutes, I will be starting the lecture. All right, I don't think we can wait any longer, so we'll be starting the lecture. Hopefully, a few of you will be joining us during the lecture. They are just late. We have finished, you have finished now the first part of the lecture conducted by Dr. Walkowiak, and the next part is dedicated to the security aspects connected with business and with commercial applications. So we'll be starting off with a few basic concepts about that. Most specifically, we will be speaking a little bit about cryptography and as a tool for improving security, and also as a tool for building trust between business partners. So to start off, today I will be speaking about some basic concepts used in cryptography. Actually, in security more than in cryptography, because the cryptography for me is just a tool, so I will not be speaking a lot about the algorithms, cryptographic algorithms, more about using those tools to ensure that you have proper security and that you can trust transactions being done using the internet. the basic concept of cryptography is the concept of encryption. Encryption means that you code the plain text in such a way that it is not readable to someone who doesn't have the decryption key. So the plain text is encrypted, being stored or transferred between computers in the encrypted form, and the recipient decrypts it. Okay, there is a very distinct difference between encryption and encoding. Okay, encoding means that the plain text is converted to some other text, which can be then reconverted back to plain text. So encryption is a sort of encoding, but the term of encoding is much broader. It can mean a lot other ways of transforming the text being transmitted or being stored, which is not encryption. A very important part of encryption, distinction between encryption and normal encoding, is that the knowledge of the algorithm is not enough to encrypt or decrypt text, that you need to have an encryption key. And also it is a requirement that even though you might know for some part of the encrypted text what was the plain text, what is the encrypted form of the text, you should not be able on that basis to find the decryption key directly, algorithmically. Of course, it's always possible to do that using the try and test method, but about that we'll be speaking in a moment. So generally, there are two classes of ciphers in use for encryption decryption. One are called symmetric key ciphers, and the other are called public key ciphers. The symmetric key ciphers are optimized towards processing lots of data in real time, or even if not real time, if that is not possible, in a very efficient, fast method. Because of that, the symmetric key ciphers are also called bulk ciphers. Okay, public key ciphers are optimized towards something completely different. Efficient, quick encryption, decryption of public key ciphers actually is an indication of a weak public key cipher. So in case of public key ciphers, the numerical complexity of encryption and decryption is very important, because this is the basis of security, of building this type of ciphers. So in case of public key ciphers, if you produce a very efficient, fast method of encryption decryption, it means that the cipher becomes weak, and you have to look for another cipher to be safe. Okay, so in the public key ciphers, because of that, are not really meant to be used for bulk encryption. That means for sending large amounts of data. Okay, so the symmetric ciphers, as the name indicates, they have just one key. The key can be reused for encryption and for decryption. Because of that, it is called a symmetric key, and it is and obviously it cannot be made public. If the key of a symmetric key cipher becomes public knowledge, that means that you cannot use it. You must generate a different key and use a different key for encryption, decryption. In case of public keys, key ciphers, there are actually two different keys. One key is used for encryption, the other key is used for decryption. One of them can be made public, and it must be the public key must be such that knowledge of the public key cannot be used to obtain the private key. Because if it was possible to algorithmically get the decryption key to get the private key on the basis of the public key, then the cipher would be useless. Okay? The whole idea is that even though there is encryption and decryption, the knowledge of the of one key does not leak the other key. Okay. So the two main differences between the ciphers are with the keys and with the complexity. In all the cases, as I have said, you can't speak about ciphers if knowledge of plain and encrypted text is sufficient to determine the key. Przepraszam, ja mam wykład teraz. Sorry. In this case, what we need to okay. So in case that a plain text and encrypted text allows you to obtain the encryption key, if such a case, such thing happens, then you can speak about encoding, but you can't speak about encryption. There are examples of such encodings. A very popular encoding for parental control, used for parental control, is the ROT4 encoding, which means that you move the 4 lower bits and the 4 higher bits of a byte being set, placed differently. That means the 4 lowest bits are moved and become the 4 highest bits in a byte, and you send it like that. Of course, if someone doesn't know the algorithm, he will see rubbish, not the text that you are transmitting, but anybody who knows it, and it is very easy to find that this is the case, then moving the rotating back the bits can give you the plain text immediately. So because of that, the encryption in this case, it's not, sorry, the encoding in this case is not encryption at all. Another thing is important connected with ciphers is the key length. Okay, in the key length of symmetric ciphers nowadays most commonly in use are 128 bits or 256, which is quite sufficient for the current levels of computational powers. But of course, it changes all the time. So the fact that now I am telling you that there is no point going above 256, it just means that now at this moment there is no point. It doesn't mean that there won't be that won't change in a year or so. I will be speaking about this in a moment, or at least today, certainly. The public key ciphers are always longer. That's because actually, as I have said, the public key ciphers are based on numerically complex algorithms that are not easily reversible. And for that to work properly, the keys must be longer. So in those cases, the secret key, so the not public key, but the secret key, the private key, is usually 1,000 or 2,000 bits at the moment. 1,000 bit is regarded as quite sufficient, but a lot of newer ciphers use 2,000 bits to make it more future robust. So a very important thing is that if you have a cipher, it doesn't matter whether it's a public key encryption or a private or a symmetric key encryption. When you have the secret private key, you can always disclose it by using the exhaustive key search. That means try and test. You try one combination of bits, see whether it works. If it doesn't, you try another, and so on. Because of that, the length of key is always very important, okay? Because the longer the key, the more tests you have to do, okay? So the max time needed to break any cipher is given by the formula that you see here. That means the time needed for a single test and the number of permutations of key bits that you have to test for as key candidates. Okay, this number is 2 to the power of the length of the key being attacked. So that means that this applies. Okay, this formula is quite obvious, but what I wanted to show you is how it works in practice. Okay? For example, if you have 128 bits, so the number of permutations is something like this. This part is not really very interesting, but the power to which 10 is being raised is quite significant. Okay, let's assume that tau is just 1 microsecond, so that you can do the test in 1 microsecond. So if you test everything sequentially, that means that you will need 10 to the power of 25 years to test all the combinations. If it needs so long to test everything, on average, you will need to test half of that. So you see, we are speaking about very high security because 10 to the power of 25 years, if it takes so long to break a cipher, then you can sleep quite safely, because in thousands of years in the future, nobody will be interested to break this cipher. But these computations have two very significant simplification. One is that the time does not change, the time needed for a single test. But the computers are improving, they are all the time being faster, and that is one thing which is very dangerous, because when you say that today that it needs 10 to the power of 25 years to break my text, to get to disclose it, I am quite safe. But if you think that this tau will decrease by half next year, okay, you are still safe, but you look at it with much greater suspicion. Okay, and the other thing is that you assume that the breaking will be done in sequence. Actually, nowadays, this algorithm of of brute force attack is very easy to parallelize. So if you have 1,000 computers attacking your ciphers, then this will decrease by 1,000. Okay, still quite safe because we have taken 128 bits, but you see that this does not really mean that it is absolutely safe. But 10 to the power of 25 years, that's extremely long. So all these approaches to breaking that I am speaking about make you sleep quite safely. Okay, there is something more difficult, that that is the so-called quantum computers, which are still a fiction, but if they appear really and start working, this will cut not by 1,000, but it will it will make the time extremely short. So if that happens, all the current ciphers will break down, and we will have to look for other ways of making secure data transmissions. Okay. Another thing I wanted to tell you is something which is called cryptanalysis. Cryptanalysis, you don't have electron cryptanalysis. I'm also not going to talk about cryptanalysis in detail, but I would like to show you just a general classification of the cryptanalysis methods to make you aware of some hazards, some dangers with cryptography, with using ciphers. Okay, what is cryptanalysis? It's a branch actually of mathematics where you look for weaknesses in the ciphers. Okay, the first commonly used cipher in the field of bulk ciphers was the DES cipher, which was the keys were 64 bits, and when cryptanalysis was started being used, immediately it became apparent that 64 bits is just a fiction, because 8 of those bits can be derived from the 56. So actually the length of the actual length of the key was not 64 but 56. When other algorithms were applied, it turned out that if you randomly use the keys for the cipher, there are a lot of keys which are much easier to break than you would think. So the cipher as such has a lot of weaknesses. So not only that 64 bits now would be, or 56 bits now would be regarded as quite dangerous with the speeds of our computers nowadays, but also it has a lot of weaknesses. So cryptanalysis tries to look for those weaknesses and tries to look at your encrypted text with the aim to decrypt it much faster than what you would expect from brute force attack. But remember, brute force attacks is always possible. You don't need any cryptanalysis for that. Cryptanalysis, its aim is to reduce the number of key candidates and in that way to reduce the time needed to break the cipher. Okay, if you can guess or make probable guesses for some key bits on the basis of some properties that you observe from the text, then the cipher becomes much weaker than the brute force attack would suggest. Okay, the methods being used, they are classified into 6 categories. The first one is the most difficult to apply, which is that you don't know anything, only the encrypted bit stream. This type, the methods which approach this type of problems, they are called analysis methods without knowledge of plain text. And this is the most difficult situation that you can have, because you actually don't know anything except the bit stream, the encrypted bit stream. There are methods, statistical methods and others to try to beat such encryptions, but they are quite weak and they don't really yield a lot of information if you have a well-tested, well-known encryption algorithm. It's more difficult for algorithms which are not yet fully tested, where such weaknesses might be disclosed by such analysis. But usually, if you force the people who try to break your cipher to be limited only to these methods, then they will not do a lot of damage. There is another category, cryptanalysis methods, where you know the plain text. That means there are some parts of the encryption data that you have for which you know or you can guess what was being encrypted. So you know both the encrypted text and the plain text for that part of the encrypted data. So you can use more sophisticated methods for trying to find what is the encryption key. Even better technique is that some of the methods require specific plain texts. So specific combinations of 0 and 1 bits in the plain text. And on that base, it's more easy to make guesses regarding the some bits in the encryption key. In the cryptographic key that you are attacking. And there are some methods which require dynamic modification of the plain text, which means that if some plain text produce something in encrypted form, you have both of them. On that basis, you ask, okay, but what happens if you change just, for example, just a single bit? So if you have a situation in which you can dynamically modify the plain text being used, for example, if you have direct access to the encryption channel and you can feed it the text you want, or if you have a huge number of plain text samples that are encryption, that are also encrypted, and you can choose from that, dynamically modifying the plain text as you want, then you can apply more easily much more sophisticated methods of cryptanalysis, so which makes things less safe. So this shows you that the amount of plain text samples that the hacker or cryptanalyst has access to will decrease the safety, the security of your data, because more sophisticated method can be applied. Okay, there are also two other categories because there are some algorithms which require this. That is category of cryptanalysis methods which require the possibility to choose the encrypted text. That means you are not interested in all the encrypted texts that are possible, but only in specific samples. Okay, you might not have the plain text for them, but from the fact that encrypted samples look something or other, you can derive some. You know the plain text for because these methods assume that it is also with known plain text, but you choose on the basis of what you look at with one sample of plain text, encrypted text. You say, and now I want a sample where the encrypted text looks something specific. Of course, in this case, feeding specific plain text on the input of encrypted channel will not help you, because you can't foresee what the encrypted text will be. But if you have a huge library of plain text and encrypted text, you can choose in them specific samples which have specific combinations of bits in the encrypted text. And also the most sophisticated attacks, but also the most difficult to apply really, because they require huge amounts of data samples to do that, is for dynamic modification of the encrypted text. You test something on plain encrypted text. On that basis, you make some guesses and you choose the next sample to be specific modification of the encrypted text from in comparison to the previous one. If you are able to do it, you can speed up the cryptanalysis quite significantly. But to do that, you actually, the only method that I can think of at the moment is that you have to have a huge number of samples from which to choose. Okay, so that's cryptanalysis. I will not be speaking more about, more specifically about the different algorithms. You have in next semester, you have a course dedicated to security. In that course, you will be speaking a lot more about the algorithms and about the specific cryptanalysis techniques that can be applied, like linear analysis, like logical analysis. There are a few different analysis methods which are quite well developed and which are applied to try if the cipher is really secure. Okay, so I will move to another problem with ciphers that you, I hope that you will get familiar with. That is that there are two types of bulk ciphers. Bulk ciphers, that means ciphers which have just one encryption-decryption key, or if the encryption-decryption keys are actually, there is a function to get one from the other, because sometimes it might be easier to remember the encryption and decryption key in two different forms transformed, but if the two keys are transformable between one and the other, then they are still symmetric keys, because it's just an algorithmic feature that you that before applying the key to encryption or decryption, you must transform it, but with a known transformation algorithm. So that doesn't make any difference to the from the cryptographic point of view. Okay, so the first type of bulk ciphers are stream ciphers. Actually, this is the oldest type of approach for computer encryption. It was used during the Second World War. It was at that time called the Verman single passed cipher, and it was really based on the fact that you needed a random or pseudo-random bit stream which could not be guessed, and you had one copy of it to use for encryption. You XORed the data to be sent with that bit stream, and at the other end you XORed it again to if you XOR a bit stream twice with the same bit stream, you will get the original bit stream. So by XORing twice, once before transmitting, the other time after receiving, you get the plain text back. Okay, so if those bit streams were really secret, then you could send information secretly. But if you have access to the to any sample of data which was transmitted in plain text and also have the encrypted version, if you XOR the two, you obtain the key, the encryption key at once. So this was based only on the fact that you can use the data for XORing just once. So it was called single pass cipher. And it was used commonly during Second World War. You remember probably from different films, if you have watched, that was the way at that time that they were decrypting messages, that there was a safe in the recipient, and if an encrypted text arrived in the embassy or in a ship or wherever, the encryption officer had to take out the specific paper tape with the encryption key, pass it through, and you got the plain text again. And of course, such a paper tape immediately had to be destroyed so that nobody could get it and get access to the transmission that way. Okay, this approach is still in use, but nowadays what we use is we use the computers, the pseudo-random generators of computers. Not every pseudo-random generator can be used, because not all of them are secure, are safe enough to use. But if you have a really good pseudo-random generator, the property of pseudo-random generators is that if you look at the bit stream generated by them, it looks random with a uniform distribution. But if you know the initial seed with which the random generator was started, then you can generate exactly the same bit stream. So the idea with stream ciphers that are nowadays in use is that you have a known pseudo-random generator. The algorithm is, of course, known, published, and so that's no secret. But the seed which is being used for seeding the random generator, it's not random, but it is the key, the secret key for transmission. So the secret key is shared by the recipient and sender of a message. The sender seeds the pseudo-random generator, generates a pseudo-random bit stream, XORs it with the data to be encrypted, and the same thing applies at the other end. The RC4 cipher was the last of stream ciphers being used. Now it is regarded, well, it is proven, not just regarded, that it's not secure. So at the moment, you will not find any secure recommended stream cipher, but in some specific applications, stream ciphers are still in use. And what is more important, that block ciphers can be used as a pseudo-random generator, and this approach is quite common, still quite common. So we get to the other type of bulk ciphers. That means the block ciphers. A block cipher is based on the fact that the input stream is split into blocks of fixed size. Each block is independently encrypted using techniques of mangling the bits and transforming some combinations of bits. So you mix the bits in some specific algorithm. You also convert some bits from specific values to different values using dictionary lookups, and the two algorithms combined produce a bit stream which is completely different from what you put in on the input. So the most commonly used block cipher nowadays is the AES cipher. Before AES, the DES was also commonly used, very popular. Now, as I have said, it is too short to be used, even though it is the DES algorithm is very well tested, but simply the length of the key is now 56 bits. Length of the key is too short. So because of that, DES is now not used at all. Okay, but AES is the standard at the moment. Okay, there is a problem with block ciphers when you need to transmit a big amount of data. Okay, so I have to illustrate this problem, I have shown you a picture, a quite common picture in the internet, and I have encrypted it actually using the best encryption method, block by block. This ECB, what means I will be explaining in a moment. But the encrypted text you see, you can't encrypt any bit, decrypt any bit, but you still can guess what was the original picture. So this is a secure transmission because you can't break this combination or this combination of bits. But since DES was using 64 bits, so you can't guess the original 64 bits, but you still can guess what was the content of the picture being encrypted. So you see in this method that it's not very secure. Okay, and this is a problem with DES, with AES, with any block cipher, because blocks being encrypted, if on the input is the same block, on the output will be also the same blocks, and that means that some information is being disclosed. Okay, so you need to do something to get something like this. So actually, just applying a block cipher is not enough. You need to apply it in such a way that you get a fully secure picture. Okay, electronic codebook is a name used for this the method that each block is being separately encrypted. So first block encrypted, get first encrypted block, second get second, and so on. If the first and second are the same, the results of the encryption of the first and the second will also be the same. Okay, so you see, this is the problem which I was showing you just now. Okay, so you can use some other techniques. Actually, with DES, they have identified 3 such approaches, which was called cipher block chaining, cipher feedback, and output feedback. So let's see, these 2 are actually, there is, if you choose one or the other, there is actually, I don't know of any reason when to choose this or this. Both work quite well. CBC, you see here. What you do is you take first block, you get an initial seed, which might be an extension to the secret key that you are using. So the initial key plus the key, the secret key applied for each encryption, but the encryption is not done to the plain text, but it's done to the plain text XORed with this initial seed. In some algorithms, it's called a nonce, so some secret value which is not repeated, which must be shared together with the key. So the next block is transmitted, but it is XORed. The plain text is XORed with the encrypted result of the previous block. The next again, and so on. As you have seen on the picture, that means that same blocks produce different encrypted blocks, and that doesn't disclose the value. The problem with this is that if you are using the CBC for data transmission, you know that data transmission can have some transmission errors. So if the transmissions break, for example, at this point, you will not be, you will have problems to get the transmitter and receiver to the same state that both knows what to XOR the initial block with. Okay, this is called synchronization problem between the transmitter and receiver, and CBC must solve it by falling back to the last well-known value used for XORing. Okay, so this is a problem with CBC. The same problem also occurs with cipher feedback, because again, when you break transmission somewhere here, to have the same value at this value, all the previous blocks had to be transmitted correctly. If somewhere there is a break in the transmission, then the transmission breaks down and the further blocks will be undecipherable on the other side of the transmission. So in case of cipher feedback, it looks very similar, but the encryption is applied not to the input block, but to the first to the initial nonce, but then to results of previous blocks. It's exactly the same security level as with this. As I have said, you can use either of the two methods, and they have quite similar properties. And there is the fourth approach, which is called output feedback, which means that the initial seed or nonce is encrypted. The encrypted nonce is used to XOR the first block. The second time encryption to the second block, and so on. Okay. In this case, if the transmission breaks somewhere, you can rework the transmission just by knowing if you missed one block because of some transmission problems, the other blocks will be decoded correctly so long as you know the amount of data that you have lost. If you have lost one block, but you have the nonce, you have the encryption, so the receiver can get the proper seed and can decode blocks after it. So if you have real-time transmission, only the first and the last method of these two can be applied because these would require to retransmit too much data to be going on. Okay, so those four modes of operation were defined for the DES algorithm. After DES algorithm with AES, two other modes of encryption were introduced, and they can be used nowadays. Also, one is called the counter mode encryption. Sorry that the picture is different, but I haven't found these pictures are taken directly from the DES documentation standard, the original standard. This is taken from some description of the counter mode encryption that I found in the internet, but I did not find the same notations for all the algorithms now being in use. So this has a slightly different notation, but it describes the same thing. Input in this case, a counter value plus a secret nonce, that means the seed, is used is encrypted. And in the first step, the result of encryption is sorted with the plain text, and that is the ciphertext from the first step. Okay, the second block, the nonce is the same because it's a shared secret. The key is the same because it is the shared secret also, but the counter changes. Here it was 0, here it is 1. So even with the same plain text, the ciphertext will be different, and so on. You increase the counter, and that way you get the results. Very similar to cipher feedback, but in case of cipher feedback, you were encrypting the same seed multiple times, which in case of some initial seeds were degenerating and causing problems. In this case, you are using just one steps, but exactly in case in terms of synchronization, it's exactly the same property as that algorithm. So this is nowadays preferred really to the output feedback. Okay, and there is another technique being used, offset codebook mode. This is a much more complicated technique. The whole thing, again, is based on some secret nonce, and of course, a secret key for encryption. The first data is being XORed from L0 is some value which is generated from the key is XORed with the nonce, and this is the encrypted and produce blocks Z1, Z2, and so on. And those blocks are used for transmitting the data. The first block is on the input XORed with Z1, and after encryption, again XORed with Z1 and sent second with Z2. So Z1, Z2 are values generated. Okay, I haven't said that. If you look at this technique, you actually are using the encryption block as a pseudo-random generator. Okay, you get the seed, pass it through encryptor, and that is seed after the first step. Again, pass it through the same thing. That's the second step. So this actually is a pseudo-random generator. So we have transformed, in this case, the block cipher into a stream cipher. Okay. In this case, we do exactly the same. We use the encryptor to generate the pseudo-random stream, which we divide into blocks again. In this case, sort first block with the first part of the stream, second block with the second part of this stream, and so on. The whole idea is that there is an algorithm which allows, it's called CHOP algorithm, which allows you to transform a checksum into a tag, which can be used as a checksum for the encrypted stream. So instead of having two checksums, one for the unencrypted text, the other for the encrypted text, you just have, you can use the checksum for the unencrypted text to test the encrypted stream. This is very useful if you think about the current day networks where data is being sent through a number of routers to between the source and destination. Okay, checksum is used for a transmission, but you can't use plain text checksum on the encrypted stream. But you can use the tags being transmitted, so you can check the encrypted text against the tag, and if it's wrong, then the router already knows that your block of data was corrupted, and it can initiate retransmission from the source much quicker than waiting for the recipients of data, who will find that the checksum after decryption finds that the checksum is wrong and require retransmission. So this technique is more friendly to rooted networks, to routers. So for that reason, it is nowadays quite often used for transmission, OCM, in short. Okay, that's symmetric bulk encryption. How about public encryption? Public In this case, there is one algorithm which is very or crypto system or cipher suite, which is very popular. That's the RSA crypto system. The RSA, the letters stand for the first letters of the authors of the mathematicians who developed this crypto system. So don't try to guess the words, because they are the surnames of three mathematicians who developed this crypto system. It uses, actually, most of public cryptography systems use some what they called numerically difficult problems. Numerically difficult problems means that you can fairly easy do the encryption or the decryption, but it's much more difficult to find the reverse function. Okay, because you can always regard encryption as a process of applying a function to the input data to obtain the output data. Okay, if you are applying a function, so you can look for the inverse function. If you can find the inverse function, then you can apply the inverse function to the encrypted data and get the decrypted data. Okay, the whole idea with numerically difficult problems is to identify a mathematical problem which does have a reverse function, but this reverse function cannot be guessed on the basis of the plain function, on the encryption function. Okay, so in other words, it means that you cannot get the decryption key from the encryption key, or the other way around, really, because you can make the encryption key public, and then the decryption key must not be derivable from the encryption key. Okay, so the RAS system is used on multiplicative inverse. That means that if you apply the exponential function to the input data, you get the encrypted data, but discrete exponentials are not reversible, unlike normal real-time real value exponentials, which can be reversed using logarithms. In case of modulo operations, that means integer operations of exponentiation, that's not really true. So multiplicative inverse cannot be found. But if you have a key which is a multiplication of which has some prime factors, you can get easy methods of encryption, decryption, but only if you can find the prime factors. So actually, what is done in this system is generate the prime factors, multiply them to get the keys, multiply them in two different ways so that you get the encryption and decryption key, and from one you can't derive the other, because actually you can, if you can find the prime factors of the number. But you know from algorithms that finding prime factors is an NP complete problem. That means that the longer the value, exponentially longer time is needed for that. And then you end up with, again, thousands of years of trying different things to find the prime factors. So that's the RSA algorithm, the first to be applied commercially. It is still being used. There are some others being developed. Commercially, there are the Diffie-Hellman and the DSA algorithms being used. They are both based on discrete logarithms, but they are not as well. Unlike RSA, they were always they were open source. That means RSA crypto system was was patented in US. So for a long time it could be used only by the owners of the patent, the RAS company, which was founded by the three authors of the crypto system. In case of Diffie-Hellman, El-Gamal, or DSA, they were published as scientific papers, so the algorithms are not patentable, so anybody can use them. So implementation of those algorithms can be used could be used in open source. Nowadays, the RSA patent has expired, and because of that, RSA can also be used in the open source. So they are used. All of them are being used. There are other algorithms, newer algorithms like the elliptical curve algorithms, about which Dr. Woda will be speaking, because they are very popular in Bitcoins and things like that, but they are not standard, so they cannot be used for commercial transmissions or commercial data encryption, at least at the moment. So the whole idea is that in these algorithms, you have two keys. You have one key, which is public. You have another key, which is private. Private key cannot be derived from the public key. In case of RSA, the other way around also applies. That means the public key cannot be derived from the private key. But in case of Diffie-Hellman, El-Gamal, or DSA, that's not true. That means the public key can be derived in those cases from the private key. It's only that the private key cannot be derived from the public case. Okay, so sorry. One more slide. I have to get back. So we have two keys. One is public, one is private. One is used for encryption, one is used for decryption. In case of RSA, since the public and private key are completely symmetrical, you can use encryption key you can use the public key for encryption, or you can use the public key for decryption, and you can use the private key for encryption and decryption. So the RSA crypto system can be used with public encryption key and private decryption key, or it can be used with public decryption key and private encryption key, okay, because they are symmetrical. In case of the other crypto system, that's not the case. That is, in case of DSA, the public key, the decryption, one moment, signature. Okay, the encryption key is private, and the decryption key is public. So only the owner of the private key can generate the encrypted text, but anybody who has the public key can decrypt that text. In case of Diffie-Hellman or El-Gamal, it works the other way around. That means in those crypto systems, the encryption key is public, so anybody can encrypt the data, but only the owner of the private key can decrypt the data. So in case of these algorithms, they are differently used. The DSA is used for signatures, and Diffie-Hellman and El-Gamal are used for transmitting encrypted data. Okay. In case of RSA, it can be used both ways, as I have said. When you apply if you regard that you have the two types of ciphers in use, you have to understand how to use them. Okay, if you have a lot of data to use, you always use symmetric ciphers for encryption. Okay, but to use symmetrical cipher, you must share a common knowledge. Okay, so you must have the encryptor and the decryptor must share the same secret key. Okay, so in case of when you are encrypting your disk, for example, you will probably be both the encryptor and decryptor, so it's fine. You know your secret key and you keep it secret and you use it to encrypt and decrypt. But if you are speaking about the transmission, you can encrypt data in this way and send it to the recipient only if the decryptor shares a secret with you. This is possible between friends, between established embassy and the government, the company and its some of its office and so on, but it's not possible in general. So this restricts the application of symmetrical ciphers to encrypt only data between people who share the common secret. Okay, so this common secret can be established using the public encryption systems. So the public encryption ciphers are used to establish a common secret, and then the data is being transmitted using this common secret. this common secret is then called a session because it is established just for a single transmission. Okay, so how you do it? Well, there are. I will be speaking about that in more detail later, but the whole point is that if one of the parties establishes some secret, encrypts it with the public key of the person that you want to send it to, send it to that person, then that person, having his private key, can decrypt this common secret, and you know then that the secret was, and only you can decrypt that secret because only you have the private key, okay? Even though the other key, the encryption key, is public. Another thing that I wanted to talk about at this moment is a cryptographic hash, or otherwise called digest. Actually, a digest or a hash is a hashing function applied to any string. Text string or bit string, doesn't matter. Here it says text string because in cryptography, a string of bits is also plain text. So, so you take some plain text, whether it's binary or whether it's really text, doesn't matter in this case. You compute on it some value by applying a hashing function. The requirement of a hashing function or digest is that the result is always a fixed number of bits. So using the hashing functions, you can categorize different strings, different bit strings, different text strings into categories, and it is quite often used in databases, in operating systems, to quickly look through a number of different entities to find the one you are looking for. In case of cryptography, we place additional requirements on the digest to be usable for cryptographic purposes. And in that case, such a digest is called a secure digest. Normally, a hashing function or digest should just categorize the different lengths, different values of strings, or string bit strings, or text strings, or byte strings into categories in such a way that they go to uniformly to different categories. So the number of different such strings with the same digest are more or less the same, and also even the smallest change in one should change the category to any other, so that the categories are not also one nearer than another, than in case of different things. So that's any digest. Numeric secure digest do it in such a way that you can't disclose any fragment of the plain text. So if you know the digest and you don't know the plain text, you you will not be able to guess any bits in the plain text, because that would weaken encryption after you encrypt the plain text. But also there is another requirement that you cannot generate a text to satisfy a given digest. That means if you have a plain text for which you have computed a secure digest and you change the text, there is no way other than computing on the new text, the digest, there is no way to change the plain text to preserve the value of the digest. So the whole point is that secure digests are being used to prevent modification of text. Okay. So if you have a plain text, modify some bits of it, there is no algorithm available to add, for example, at the end some additional bits and get the initial plain text, the initial digest that it is satisfied. Okay, actually the algorithms used for cryptographic hashes nowadays, there are very efficient methods of algorithms for attacking the cryptographic hashes, the secure digests. And because of that, the digests are not very secure. The ones which were used quite securely a few years ago now are regarded as very insecure. It started with MD2, then MD5 was broken, SHA is being reported as broken, so you now are using different variants of SHA2, SHA 512, yes. So that is an example of SHA2, which is being reported that it is also liable to this breaking algorithm that was developed for MD5. So this is quite at the moment quickly changing field of study, and it's not really very easy to say which SHA algorithms are secure. All the three that were used, I think 4 or 5 years, they were regarded as quite secure. Now are insecure. We are now using SHA2 and SHA3 algorithms. Those are classes of algorithms which are more secure to this attack, but okay, SHA3 is now regarded by many as secure, but it's not proven in any way. And since it's a very new algorithm, you don't know whether it's better to use SHA2, which we know that can be attacked using the algorithms developed for the previous ones, but it still takes too long to be feasible at the moment, or to use SHA3, which is not really tested and we don't know whether this algorithm for attacking it can be applied with some changes or not. Okay, I think that I have exceeded the time for the lecture a little bit because you were not joining the lecture on time. So please next Wednesday, because the next lecture is on next Wednesday, not Thursday. So remember, next week, Wednesday is Thursday, so you will be having at 7:30 this lecture as in on any Thursday, not Wednesday. So thank you very much. If you have any questions or comments to what I have managed to present until now, please ask them. If not, we'll continue next week these slides. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, thank you. So I will stop sharing the screen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Is there anybody who would like to talk with me before I switch off? No? Then thank you very much. Bye-bye. I will finish the session now.